What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, talking today about Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, because this is a game that now I've had a chance to play quite a bit of. I've busted some ghosts, I've leveled up my proton pack, and I have to say that this is a project that going into it, I was a little bit skeptical. This is an asymmetrical multiplayer experience. 4 people play as the Ghostbusters, 1 person plays as a ghost, and a lot of very wacky hijinks unfold. This is a very social-based game. I do want to say that right up front. This is one of those games where if you're playing it with your friends, if you're actually using microphones and talking trash to the ghost and trying to play deadly hide-and-seek, it is a much better experience. But even beyond that, the core mechanics here are certainly intriguing. Now, I do want to say, I don't consider myself really to be a Ghostbusters fanboy, really at all. I have, of course, seen the movies. I did grow up watching the old 90s cartoon show and stuff, but to me, I kind of went into this just hoping that the game's core mechanics were actually good, and they definitely are, but with a couple tiny issues that we need to address. So let's break down the first and most important aspect of this, which is what the heck is Spirits Unleashed. So we are playing as the next generation of Ghostbusters. We're the people that are taking over because the old timers have sort of decided to shift into a management position. People like Dan Aykroyd have returned, and they are actually using this chance to sort of play their characters again in a very high energy fashion. Even somebody who isn't a fanboy, it's kind of fun to hear these people talk about, ghost traps and saving the world, even those events now are decades in the past. We're playing as a new recruit who's just joined the Ghostbusters, and it's our job to sort of keep the name alive, to bust some ghosts, because busting makes us feel good. Now, in this game, it has randomized lobbies, the typical thing you'd experience. So when you queue up, you choose whether you want to try and play on Team Ghost or obviously on Team Ghostbusters. Having played both, I have to say they're very different. I'm actually kind of impressed by just how fun being the ghost is. I want to talk about that first because it's way more quirky. Have you ever seen those games like Prop Hunt, where you can basically try and blend into an environment and the other people are trying to find you? When you're playing as the ghost, you can unleash minions, you can scare people. The entire purpose is to haunt a building. Think of it as like a 10-minute timer. If you manage to stay pretty undetected and certainly uncaptured for about 10 to 12 minutes, then you are going to win. Now, you can speed this timer up by terrifying civilians. There's basically these NPCs throughout the different buildings, and when you try and go up to them, you can fly through them to spook them. You can sort of punch them in their face. Each of the different ghosts has different abilities. Like this guy here is very unique. He has the ability to just possess people. He can go into their bodies and puppeteer them around, and while doing that, obviously it's going to terrify them, and the Ghostbusters aren't going to want to exactly laser beam you in the face if you currently have a big fleshy meat shield. Now, each of these different people, you're trying to stir up fear, you're trying to completely haunt the building room by room, and I like the fact that everybody has different ectoplasmic super abilities that all have different cooldowns. The biggest part about the ghost is that while you're flying around or sprinting, basically if you click the sprint button or if you're using your abilities, it drains your energy. Now, your energy recharges on its own just by being chill. It recharges a lot faster, though, if you possess an inanimate object. So you can possess a vacuum cleaner or a fan or something like that and cruise around the level as this random object. This recharges your energies and your skills, so you can go back to unleashing your ectoplasmic goodness. I like this, though, because it's funny to try and be hiding from people and suddenly like a soda machine is running away down the hallway. But how do we catch them? As the Ghostbusters, how are you even going to detect somebody that looks like, a teddy bear running down the hallway? That's where the ghost tracking mini-game aspect of this comes in. When you're playing as the Ghostbusters, you have the little EKG meter. By turning around and sort of waving it about, it slowly picks up readings and it gets louder and more, for lack of a better word, erect as time goes on. Getting closer to the target, it gets more excited. Now there's these little dot readings on the screen itself. This tells you whether it is a ghost, a possessed object, or a rift. Now, this is the most interesting aspect of the game to me because it's what sort of drags out the levels. It's not just about catching the ghost once. In each round you play, there is the spirit that needs to be captured. obviously, but additionally, there are 3 separate rifts. They're basically like different portals back to the land of the dead. If you bust the ghost before you've closed the rift, he can come back. So this means that he kind of has 3 lives per round unless you find them first, which sometimes you do. While you're trying to investigate with your little EKG reader, sometimes you'll find a creepy artifact instead of a spirit. You'll find like a teddy bear or a bleeding clock, and by zapping it with your proton pack, it's going to destroy it and open up a rift, which then takes quite a bit of damage. Now, so far, we've been positive, and there is some more positives I do want to talk about, but let's dig into the biggest negative of this game, which is that the balance can feel a little bit wonky at times. The biggest detriment to asymmetrical multiplayer, which in general I'm very much a fan of, is that in this case, since there's 4 separate Ghostbusters and 1 ghost, then mathematically, that means the ghost needs to be roughly 4 times stronger than the Ghostbusters. And in a lot of ways, you are. But this kind of sucks because it means that while you're playing this game, if you see the ghost, you need to try and grab them with your proton beam. You gotta zap them and drag them. Your proton beam is constantly overheating those. You're having to worry about maintaining, venting the heat itself to make sure you're blasting and cooling and dropping down one of these traps to try and suck them into it. Doing this by yourself, though, is very nearly impossible. Like perhaps if you found a very bad or inexperienced ghost who's not practiced at ducking and dodging yet and being evasive, maybe you could capture them on your own. But typically, because it's so easy to just break out of the beam if one person is holding you, it makes the game feel like you have to constantly be glued to the hip of your partners. This is one of those games where if you have a bad teammate, it completely ruins the experience. Now, I did have a chance to play this game before launch with some other YouTubers. I had a chance to play it with some people over at IGN and stuff like that. And I have to say that when this game is the best by far is when you can communicate, when you're talking, when you're calling out orders, when you and another person are holding a ghost with your particle beams and a third person throws out a trap to capture it. It's incredibly fun when that works. If you mess up though, this game does definitely punish your errors. Your proton pack can overheat. Your little tiny traps, your ghost traps, have a very short battery and you have to manually pick them back up. So if you dropped a ghost trap and then you tried to chase a ghost down because it's running away, well then a lot of times that just means that you're gonna have to backtrack or call to your friends and tell them, hey, bring a trap, I'm gonna try and hold it down. It's an interesting meta. It's an interesting idea. I just feel like at times it doesn't feel like it's very well balanced. It does feel like if you and a couple people are coordinated well, the ghost will not stand a chance. Whereas a lot of times when I was a ghost, I was completely stomping people just because they haven't had a chance to level up their characters. Because yes, there is a bit of an RPG system to it. As you bust ghosts, as you finish missions, you get a lot of experience points, which just levels up your account. This seems to be mostly cosmetic stuff, but by using your gadgets, these get stronger. This can unlock stuff like customized different amounts of tether, cooling, range. It sort of lets you affect the abilities of your proton thrower and also the traps themselves. There's also these secondary gadgets like weird ghost fart grenades or a grapple hook that lets you jump straight to the second floor because there is some multi-tiered levels and stuff like that. For the most part, I guess a lot of these upgrades, they didn't feel too substantial. Playing good is already so based on just finding the ghosts and trapping them in a corner, because thankfully the ghost can't go through walls, that it made it where when you screwed up, it gets punished so severely that a couple little tiny stat points on your gear didn't really seem to make a difference. I like this game. I do wish it had a bit more to do with the Ghostbusters, beyond the little bit of voice acting, and like every 4 or 5 missions you do, you get a little bit of like cutscene plot line of the hijinks going on back at the firehouse. But this does feel like a random disconnected adventure. If you're looking for a game that's definitely more about Ghostbusters than just busting ghosts, I'd probably play something like Ghostbusters the Game Remastered. If you're looking for fun, asymmetrical multiplayer with your friends, this is definitely for you. It's hard to put a number on something like this. I do consider this to be a standard review, but it's just difficult to put a number on it because the friends you play with, the times where you find fun randoms and capture a ghost last second, that stuff is just so fun that it's difficult to really score social interactions. It feels like trying to put a number on a date. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts after playing a bunch of Spirits Unleashed. What do you think about the Ghostbusters, and what do you think about this game? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and please give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.